Alright, Chapter 6, How to Change Anything in Your Life, the Science of Neuroassociative Conditioning. Awaken the Giant Within, Anthony Robbins. Chapter 6, How to Change Anything in Your Life, the Science of Neuroassociative Conditioning. The beginning of the habit is like an invisible thread. By every time we repeat the act of strengthening the strand, added to another filament until it becomes a greater cable, binds us in irrevocably thought and act, worse than sweat and marden. If you want and I want to change our behavior, this is the only one effective way to do it. We must link unbearable immediate sensation to our pain of an old behavior, incredible immediate sensation pleasure to a new one. Think about it this way. All of us, through the experience of other life, have learned certain patterns of thinking, behaving, getting ourselves out of pain into pleasure. We all experience these emotions of boredom, frustration, anger, feeling overwhelmed, and develop strategies for ending these feelings. Some people use shopping, some use food, some use sex, some use drugs, some use alcohol, some yell at their kids. They know consciously, unconsciously, neural pathway will relieve their pain, taking them some level of the pleasure in that moment. Where whatever strategy, if you and I are going to change, we have to have simple steps. The outcome is what you find a more direct, empowering way to get out of pain into pleasure, ways that will more effectively elegant. The 6 steps of the neuroassociative conditioning will show you how to create a direct highway out of pain into pleasure with no disempowering detours. They are neuroassociating condition master step number 1. Decide what you really want and what's preventing you from having it now. You've been surprised at how many people came into the from a private therapeutic work. When I asked what they wanted, they spend 20 minutes telling me what they didn't want and what they now no longer wanted to experience. We get to remember that whatever we focus on in our life, if we keep focusing on what you don't want, we'll have more of it. First step to create any change is deciding what you want, so you have something to move forward to. The more specific you can be about what you want, the more clarity you will have, the more power you will command to achieve what you want more rapidly. We also must learn what's preventing us from having what we want, and invariably what's preventing us from changing is that we like more pain, linking more pain with making change and staying with what we are. We either have their belief like, I have changed, I will have pain, or we will have an unknown change might bring. Neuroassociation conditioning master step 2. Get leverage associative paths. Massive pain is on changing now. Massive pleasure to experience changing now. Most people know whether they really want to change. They have get themselves to do it, but the change is usually not a question of capability. It also almost always is a question of motivation. If someone put a gun to your head and said, you better get out of the depressed state and start feeling happy now, I bet any one of us could find a way to change our emotional state for the moment under these circumstances. But the problem, as I've said, is that change often should and not must. Or it is a must, but it's simply a must for someday. The only way we're going to make change now is if you create a sense of urgency that is intense but compelled to follow through. If we want to create change, then we have to realize that it's not the question whether we can do it, but rather what we'll do. When whatever we will or not comes down to the level of motivation, which in turn comes down to those twin powers that shape our lives in pain and pleasure. Every change you've accomplished in your life is the result of changing the neuroassociations about what the moves means pain and what means pleasure. So often that we have the hard time getting over ourselves with change because we have mixed emotions about changing. On the other hand, we want to change. We don't want to get into cancer. We don't want to get cancer from smoking. We don't want to lose personal relation because the temper is out of control. We don't want our kids to feel in love because we're harsh on them. We don't want to feel undepressed in the rest of our lives because of something else happened in our past. We don't want to feel like victims anymore. On the other hand, we fear change. We wonder, what if I stop smoking cigarettes, but I die of the cancer anyways, and I give up the pleasure of cigarettes used to give me? Or what if I get let go of the negative feeling about rape and it happens to me again? We are mixed with emotions where We link both pain and pleasure changing. We cause our brain to uncertain as to what we do and keeps us from utilizing full resources to make kinds of changes that can happen literally in a moment. And if every ounce of that being were committed to them. How do we turn this around? One of the things that turns virtually anyone around is reaching a pain threshold. This means experience pain at such an intense level that you must change now. A point where the brain says, I've had it, I can't spend another day, not another moment, living in the feeling this way. They have the experience with the personal relationships. For example, your lung is painful, you really weren't happy, but you stated in any ways, you realize that you would get better without doing anything to make it better. If you were in so much pain, why didn't you leave? Even though you're unhappy with your fear of the unknown was more powerful with a motivating force here. Yeah, I'm unhappy now, you may have thought, but I believe the person I've never find anyone. I must know how to deal with the pain I have now. This kind of thinking keeps the people of the making changes finally thought one day with the pain of the beginning of the negative relation between them, the greater and the fear of the unknown. So hit a threshold and made a change. Maybe they've done some same thing with your body when finally they decided they couldn't spend another day when doing something about excess weight. Maybe did you have the experience with the final push over the edge with the failure of being able to squeeze into your favorite pair of jeans, or a sensation of your thunder thighs rubbing against each other as you wobble up the stairs, or just the sight of the bubbleless folds or excessive flesh hanging out from the side of your body. The Alpo diet. Recently, a woman in a seminar told me about her fail-safe strategy that she had developed with shredding unwanted pounds. She and her friend had committed over and over again to lose weight, but failed to keep the promise each and every time. Finally, both reached a point where losing weight was must. Based on what I taught them, they needed some leverage to push themselves over the edge. They needed to make me keep promising much more painful than anything could imagine. They decided to commit each other, the group of defiant friends, that if they welched on their promise, and this time they would each have to eat a whole can of whole Alpo dog food. So I stave off any hit with craving. Those two enterprising women told every one of them that they kept their cans in plain view at all times, and constant reminder. So she told them that when they started to feel hunger pains, they picked up the can and read the label. The ingredients boasting horse meat chunks. They found no difficulty in sticking with their commitment. They achieved the goal without a hitch. As a lever device that we utilize in order to lift the more tremendous burden we could not otherwise manage. Leverage is absolutely critical to creating a change with the feeling of freeing yourself of the behavioral burdens of smoking, drinking, overeating, cursing, emotional patterns, feeling depressed, worried, feeling fearful, inadequate, you name it. Changes require more than just establishing knowledge that you should change. It's knowledge, the deepest emotional, basic sensory level that you must change. You've tried many times to make the change, but you failed to do so. This simply means the level of the pain and failed change to the not intense enough that you have not reached the threshold of the ultimate leverage. When I was doing private therapy, it was imperative that I find a point of the greatest leverage in order to help people to make the change in one session into the years of therapy have failed to accomplish. I started every session by saying that I could not work with anyone who was committed to changing. Now, one of the reasons was who wasn't committed to changing now. One of the reasons was I charged $3,000 for a session. I didn't want them to invest their money unless they were absolutely to get the result that they committed today. In this one session, many of the people, if I had flown in from some other part of the country, thought by sending them home without handling the problem motivated my clients to spending at least a half an hour convincing me that they were indeed committed and would do anything to change now. With the kind of leverage, creating a change became a matter of course. Paraphrase philosopher Nizik, he was so strong enough that I couldn't bear almost anyhow. I found 20% of any of the changes know how, and 80% is knowing why. If we gather a set of strong enough reasons to change, we could change with a minute something we have failed to change in years. Give me a lever long enough and a prop strong enough, and I can single-handedly move the world. Archimedes. Greatest leverage you can create yourself is the pain that comes from the inside, not the outside. Nothing you fail to live up your own, staring with your life with the ultimate pain If we fail to act in accordance with our own view of ourselves, our behaviors inconsistent, our standards, identity we hold for ourselves, then the chasm between our actions, who we dare to make change. Leverage created by the pointing out of the inconsistency between someone's standard and their behavior is incredibly effective at causing them to change. There is not pressure placed on them from the outside world, previously built upon themselves from within. One of the strongest forces of the human personality with the drive to preserve the integrity of their own identity. The reason so many of us seem the walking contradiction seems that we never recognize inconsistencies for what they are. If you want to help somebody, you want to access the kind of leverage, making the wrong, pointing out their inconsistency, but rather asking them questions that cause them to realize themselves that they are inconsistent. There's much more of the powerful lever acting themselves. If you try to exert the external pressure they push against, the internal pressure is next to impossible to resist. The kind of pressure is available to use ourselves. The compliancy breeds stagnation and left you extremely dissatisfied with the current pattern of behavior. You won't be motivated to make the change that's necessary. Let's face it, the human and animal respond to the pressure. So why would someone not change when they feel now that they should? To associate more pain to making the change if not changing, they make change someone, including over selves. May simply reverse this so the change is incredibly painful beyond threshold tolerance. The idea of changing actually attractive and pleasurable. Get true leverage. Ask yourself the pain-inducing questions. What will this cost me if I don't change? Most of it is given by estimating price of change, but what if the price of it not changing? Ultimately, I will miss out on a life if I don't make the change. What already costing me mentally, emotionally, physical, financially, spiritual, making the pain of the change feel so real to you, so intense, so immediately you can put off taking action any longer. If this doesn't create even enough leverage, then focus the effects of your loved ones, your children, and other people that you care about. Many of those do, but many of the more other ones that they do for ourselves. Some picture, graphic detail, how much failure to change the negative impact of the people that are most important to you. Second step is pleasure associated questions to help you link those positive sensations of the idea of changing. If I do change, what will it make me feel almost about myself? What kind of momentum could I create when I can change in my life? What other things can I accomplish really made with the change of the today? How will my family and friends feel? How happier will I be? The kids has got a lot of reasons. The key is to get a lot of reasons, better yet, strong enough reasons why the change should take place immediately, not someday in the future. If it's not driven to make the change now, then don't really have the leverage. Now that you've linked pain in the nervous system to not changing, pleasure to making the change, the driven to create a change, and proceed the third master step of the neuroassociation conditioning. Neuroassociation conditioning master step 3, interpret limiting pattern. In order for us to use the consistent feeling a certain way, we develop the characteristic patterns for thinking, focus the same engine of the ideas, and asking ourselves the same question challenges. More people will want a new result of continuing to act the same way. Once I've heard it said, they definitely insanely doing the same things over and over again, expect a different result. Please do not misunderstand me. There's nothing wrong with you. You don't need to be fixed, and I suggest you avoid anyone who weaves the metaphors to describe you. The resources needed to change anything in your life within you right now. If just that you have the set of neuroassociation habits habitually caused you to not fully utilize capability, what you must do is reorganize neural pathways so that they consistently guide you in the direction of your desires rather than frustration and fears. To get the new results in our lives, you can just know what we want and get leverages ourselves, and we can be highly motivated, trained to keep it doing the same things, running the same with the inappropriate patterns. Our lives are not changing. All we experience is more and more pain, frustration. Have you ever seen a fly that's trapped in a room and immediately searching for the light, so it heads for the window, smacking itself against the glass again and again, sometimes for hours? However, most people do this. They have highly motivated to change with a highly intense leverage, but all the motivation of the world won't help you get outside of the closed window. You've got to change the approach. The fly stands a chance once and backs off, looks we got another exit. If you run in the same old pattern, when you get in the same old results? Record albums create the same sounds consistently because of their pattern, continuous groove in which the sound is encoded, which happened if the one day I pick up the record and took a needle and scratched it across to become back and forth for a dozen times. It does enough. There's a point where the pattern is so deeply interruptive that the record will never play the same way again. Likewise, interrupting someone's limiting pattern behavior or emotional cannot change with life, because sometimes it creates leverage, and with 2 steps alone, you can change virtually anything. The additional notion that neuroassociation conditioning are just the way to make sure that the change lasts and develop a new choice of the enable the empowering. I created a fun pattern to interrupt the recently one of my 3-day unlimited power seminars in Chicago. One man claimed he really wanted to kick the chocolate habit. Yet it was clear to me that he received a great deal of pleasure for the identity of the chocolate addicted. He was even wearing a t-shirt that proclaimed, "I want the world, but I'll settle for a chocolate." This provided a strong evidence for the man, although many have the desire to stop eating chocolate, also have a great deal of the secondary gain to maintain this habit. Sometimes people want me to create a change because of the behavior, the emotional pattern creates pain for them. But they might also derive the benefit from the very varying thing that they're trying to change. But it becomes injured, for example, and suddenly everyone weighs on them hand and foot and give them with a great deal of attention. You must find that their injuries don't heal as quickly. While they want the pain to be over unconsciously, they want more of the pleasure knowing that people care. You can do everything right, with the secondary gain is too strong. You will find yourself going back in the old ways. Someone with the secondary gain has mixed emotions about changing. They say they want to change, but often subconsciously believe that it's maintaining an old behavior, emotional patterns, giving them something that they can't get it another way. Thus, there's nothing willing to get over the feeling depressed, even though it's painful, but being the depressed gets the attention. For example, they don't want to feel depressed, they desperately want attention. At the end of the near attention wasn't ends out, but they were stay depressed. The need for attention is one of the form of the secondary gain. In order to resolve this, they want to give the person enough leverage that must change. If they also, we must show them a new way to get their needs met. Alright, well, on some level, I'm sure the man knew that it needed to kick the chocolate. I'm also fairly certain that he knew he could use the opportunity to get some serious attention. Time the secondary gain involved with the step of the leverage, as that a massive pattern interrupted would crave the necessary leverage. And sir, I explained, you're telling me you get rid of giving up chocolate. That's great. That's one thing I'll want you to do before you eliminate the old pattern. He asked, "What's that for?" I said, "To get your body in the right condition for the 9 days, you must eat nothing but chocolate. Only chocolate can pass your lips." People in the audience started giggling, and the man looked at me uncertainly. "Can I drink anything?" And he asked, "Yes, I can. You can drink water 4 glasses of the day, that's all. And everything else must be chocolate." He shrugged his shoulders and grinned. "Okay, Tony, if that's the way you want it, I can do this without changing. I hate to make a fool out of you." I smiled, continued in the seminar, and you should have seen what happened next. As if magic, dozens of chocolate bars and candies materialized out of people. Pockets and purses and briefcase were passed down to him. By lunch break, he had been inundated with every last morsel of chocolate in the auditorium. Baby Ruths, Butterfingers, Snickers, Milky Ways, M&M's, Almonds, Fanny Farmer Fudge. He caught an eye in the lobby outside and said, "Tony, thanks, that is great." He examined that as he was unwrapped and popped a Hershey Kiss into his mouth. He determined to show that he could beat me, but he failed to realize that he was competing with me. He wasn't competing with me, he was competing with himself. I was merely enlisting the bodies as an ally to getting leverage by kicking in this pattern. You know how thirsty sugar makes you. By the end of the day, the guy's throat was absolutely raw. He definitely lost the passion of chocolate. As people continued to shovel the cracker bars into his pockets and pressing his palms in thin bits. By the second day, he had definitely lost his sense of the humor and was ready to cry uncle. They have some more chocolate, I insisted. He unwrapped the 3 musketeers and glared at me. By the third morning, he trailed the auditorium looking like a man who had spent all night with praying in a porcelain godless who. "How was breakfast?" I asked. People laughed. "Not so good," he said. I admitted weakly, "Have some more." And I said, Phoebe, like I've never... Feebly, he accepted another piece of chocolate from someone sitting behind him, and I failed to open it and even look at it. "What's the matter?" I asked. He said, fed up. He nodded. "Come on, you're the chocolate champion." And I goaded, "He have some more. Isn't chocolate the greatest? How about some Mounds bars and peanut and M&M's and a whole box of Rocky Road fudge? Can I just taste it? Doesn't it make your mouth water?" The longer I looked at it, the greener he got. Have some more, I said, finally exploded. You can't make me. The audience laughed uproariously, and as the man realized what he said, all right, then throw the candy away and sit down. Later I came back to him and insisted him selecting empowering alternatives to the chocolate, laying down some new pathways to pleasure that more empowering didn't require him consume something he knows he wasn't good for him. I really got to work with the conditionings of the new association, helping to replace the old addiction of the smorgasbord, healthful behaviors, power breathing, exercising, water, rich foods, proper food, combining, and so on. I created leverage on this guy yet, but if you give someone pain in their body, the undeniable leverage, they do anything to get out of pain into pleasure. Simultaneously, I broke this pattern. Everybody else was trying to stop eating chocolate. I demanded that he eat it. There's something he never expected and massive interrupted his pattern. He rapidly linked to the pain of sensation to the idea that eating chocolate with new neural pathway was laid down overnight, that his old Hershey highway was beyond recognition. When I was used to conduct private therapies, people would say to me, sit down in my office and begin to tell me that what their problem was. They'd say, my problem is, and they'd burst into tears out, cry, and as soon as that happened, I would stand up and shout, excuse me. This was a jolt to them, and they followed up with, what, we haven't started yet. Usually they responded, oh, I'm sorry. And then I immediately changed their emotional state and regained the control hysterically to watch the people who felt that they had no control over their lives would immediately prove that they already knew the exact how to change and how they felt. One of the best ways to interrupt someone's pattern to do this is don't expect things that are radically different than experienced before. Think some of the ways you can interrupt your own patterns. Take a moment and think some of the more enjoyable, disruptive ways you can interrupt a pattern, being frustrated, worried, overwhelmed. Next time I step to feel depressed, jump and look at the sky and yell at the most idiotic tone with a voice, hallelujah, my feet don't stink today. A stupid, silly move like that will definitely shift your attention, change your state, and immediately definitely change your state with everyone around you as you begin to realize that no longer depressed, just as crazy. If you overeat on a regular basis and you want to stop, give you this technique, it'll definitely work. You were willing to commit to it the next time. Find yourself in the restaurant overeating, jump into the middle of the room and point out at the chair and scream at the top of your lungs, pig! I guarantee you that you do this 3 or 4 times in a public place, you won't eat there and overeat anymore. You'll likely link that to much pain of the behavior. Just remember that the most outrageous your approach is breaking pattern, the more effective it will be. One of the key distinctions in interrupting a pattern is that you must do it the moment a pattern is recurring. Pattern interrupts happens with us every day. When you're saying, I just lost the train of thought, you're indicating that someone interrupted your pattern of concentration. You haven't been deeply involved with a conversation with a friend, or someone interrupt with a moment that they can back wander. Where are we? Of course, you have the classic example of the pattern interrupter. Just remember, if you want to create change, if you learn from the past, get pleasure taking circuitous route that includes a series of negative consequences. We need to break the old pattern, and we need to scramble it and beyond recognition, find a new pattern that's next step, and condition it again and again until it becomes a consistent approach. Alright, how to break limiting patterns of feelings of action. Again, often it's true that interpreting a pattern enough of the times change with almost anyone. Simple way of breaking a pattern is a scrambling sensation we link with our memories. The only reason we observe the representing the things in a certain way in our minds. For example, if your boss yells at you, you mentally rerun the experience for the rest of the day, picturing him, her yelling at you over and over again. They feel progressively worse, let the experience continue with the effect with you, not take with the record in the mind, scratch many times that you can experience these things anymore that may not make it even funny. Maybe you can even make it funny. Try this right now. Do the following. Think of the situation when they feel sad, frustrated, angry. Then now the first step of the nano association conditioning already covered with the feel bad. Now about the situation. How do you make it to be able to feel when you want to feel that way? What's been preventing you from feeling that way? Sensation linked to the said situation. Would it be wonderful if we could get that, feel good about it? Now get some leverage on yourself, and if you do not change how you feel about the situation, how you will continue to feel pretty lousy. I bet. Don't you want to pay I'll bet you don't want. Do you want to pay the price of the continually carrying around negative sensations? Upset you toward this or the person's situation. If you change now, but they wouldn't feel better. Alright, scrabbling the pattern. You've got enough leverage now. Scramble the disempowering feelings until they are no longer come up with it after reading the takes all steps. The situation in your mind with bothering you so much that the picture is a movie. Don't feel upset with it, just match. Watch it one time, seeing everything that happened. Take the same experience but turn it into a cartoon. Set it up with a chair with a big and silly grin on your face, breathing fully. Run the image backward as fast as you can so that you can see everything happening in reverse. Someday you'll say something. Watch them swallow their words. Let the movie run backward fast, very fast motion. Run it forward again in every faster motion. Even faster. Change the colors image of the everybody face with a rainbow color. If there's someone in particular who upsets you, cause their eyes to grow very large like Mickey Mouse and their nose to grow like Pinocchio. Do this at least a dozen times, back and forth, sideways, scratching the record with your imagery with a tremendous speed and humor. Create some music in your mind as you do this. Maybe his favorite song, maybe sometimes some type of cartoon music. Like, link the weird sounds to the old image that used to be upset you. Then definitely change the sensation. Keep the whole process if there isn't speed with the playback, the imagery level of humor, exaggeration you can link it to. Now think about the situation was bothering you. Notice how you feel now. If you've done effectively, easily broke up in the pattern so many times, the difficulty and impossible to get away with the negative feeling. If it can be done with the things that have been bothering you for years, the most often the more effective approach than trying to analyze with the whys and where else for the situation, which does not change the sensation you link to the situation. Simplistic as it seems, the effective scrambling a situation will work in the most cases, even the trauma that has been involved. Why does it work? Because all of our feelings are based on the image. We focus with the minds, with the sound, with the sensation. We link with the specific image of as we change the images and sounds. We change how we feel with the addition of the again and again, making it difficult to go back into the old pattern. One way of back patterning is just to stop doing something. You go cold turkey. If you stop running in a pattern again and again, the neural pathway will gradually dissipate. Once a neural connection is made, the brain will always have the pathway, but unless the pathway is used because of the overgrown, like anything else, if you don't use it, you begin to lose it. Now that you've broken the pattern that has been holding you back, now you have the open space to. Neural association condition master step 4, creating a new empowering alternative. 4 steps are absolutely critical with the establishing a long-term change. In fact, with the failure most of the people to find the alternative way of the getting out of the pain into the feeling of the pleasure is major of the reason of the people's attempts to change the area are only temporary. Many people get into the point where they have changed, where changes must, because they link so much pain with their old pattern that they link pleasure with the idea, change the interrupt for their patterns, but after that, they have nothing to replace with the old pattern. Remember, all the neurological patterns were designed to help you get without pain into the pleasure. These patterns will be established, whether they have negative side effects. If you've learned a habit that you can get out of the pain, you get back to the gun. You go back to it again and again, since you found it no better way to getting feelings you desired. If you were following each of one of these steps, you've gotten clear on what you've wanted, what will prevent you from getting it, with the getting out and leverage on yourself, with the interruptive, with the pattern you fill with the gap, with a new set of choices that will give it the same pleasurable, with a lot of new ways to replay with whatever the benefits you get. Used to get an old behavior, the benefits of the old feeling, with the behaviors must be preserved, with the new behavior, the feelings, with eliminating the side effects. What can you replace with that worry with? How about a massive action on a plan that you've of meeting your goals? The pressure can be replaced with the focus on how to help others who are in need. If you're not sure how to get yourself out of pain and to feel pleasure, replacement of your smoking, drinking, worrying, other undesirable emotional behavior, you simply find the answer with modeling by people who have turned these things around themselves. To find people that have made last chance guarantee you'll find them taking an alternative replace with the old behavior. The good example is my friend with the Frank Tarkington. When Fran I first started doing a personal with the Power television show together, he had a habit that really surprised me. He was addicted to chewing tobacco. I've been meeting the frame. Suddenly he would turn his head and spit. This did not match my picture of the powerful, elegant man, but he had been doing it for over 20 years. As Refrain would tell me later, chewing tobacco was one of the greatest pleasures in life. It was like the best friend. It was on the road and felt alone. He could chew tobacco and he wouldn't feel alone anymore. In fact, he had told a group of friends one time that if he had chose between sex and chewing tobacco, he'd chew tobacco. That's how false neural associations. He would wire a pathway without a plan into pleasure with a highway of chewing tobacco. If you use a continual use of reinforcement, he created a neural trunk line link narrow trunk line from tobacco to pleasure. This was his favorite route of change. What got him to change his behavior? Finally, he got enough leverage on himself that one day, with a little help from a friend, he began to see that chewing tobacco was massively incongruent with the quality of the man he'd become and represented the lack of control over the life and single being in charge of his life. This one of Fran's highest value, but his standard he could not break it. It was too painful. He in that position started with the direct of the mind, focused on the possibility of the mouth of cancer, pictured vividly until pretty soon he was driven away with the idea of using tobacco with the taste and started with the disgust him, and his images helped him getting a leverage of himself and interrupt the pattern he previously linked to the using tobacco from the pleasure. The next important key with the frame found new ways to get the pleasure of that even more effective than tobacco. He poured himself into his business like never before, started producing results that he had made from his company knowledge, where one of the most successful computer software companies on Wall Street, even more powerful than now with the need of the new companion. He decided to attract a real one, found a woman of his dreams, learned to get the kinds of emotions and feelings of the relationship that he would never get from any other source. Often, if we break out the old patterns enough, our brains will automatically search for the replacement pattern to give it the feelings that we desire. With the people will finally break the pattern of smoking, sometimes game what the brain looks like with a new way to create the same kinds of pleasurable feelings. Now they eat mass quantities of the food to get them. The key then is for us to use the conscious choice of new behaviors and feelings, which we're going to replace the old ones. Studies in transformation. A statistical study was conducted in the research of Nancy Mann to evaluate the level of rehabilitation reform drug abuse for the adoption of the replacement behavior that appear to play a major role, even with the complex field of the chain of the group of the study was forced to give their addiction through external pleasure, but they often applied with the legal system. It was talked about with a section of the leverage external pressure, but the rarely was the lasting impact. Sure enough, the men and women that returned to their old habits assumed the pressure was lifted. They assumed they were released from the jail. Second group and truly wanted to quit, but tried to do so on their own. Their leverage was primarily with internal as a result of the behavioral changes had lasted a great deal longer, often as much as 2 years after the initial commitment. They even caused the relapse and suffering significant amount of the stress which occurred. They often reverted back to the drug habit as a way of getting out of the pain into their pleasure by, because they had not found a replacement with the old neural pathway of the group. Their group replaced their addiction with a new alternative. Some of them they gave them the feelings that they had sought originally, or perhaps something that made them feel even better. Many found fulfilling relation, spiritual enlightenment, career that they could have complete passion about. As a result, many have never returned to the old drug habit. The majority lasted an average of over 8 years before any backsliding occurred. The people of society succeeded in kicking their drug habit and followed our first four step of the neuro-associated condition. That's why they were successful. Some of them lasted only 8 years, however, but because they did not utilize the fifth and critical step of the neuro-association condition. Alright, master step number 5. Condition neural pattern until it is consistent. Condition is the way to make sure that the change you create is consistent and lasting long term. The simplest way of conditioning something is simply to rehearse it again and again until the neurological way is created. He found an empowering alternative managing doing it until you see that you can get you out of pain and into pleasure quickly. The brain will begin to associate as with a new way of producing the result on a consistent basis. If you do this, you'll go back to the old pattern and rehearse the new empowering alternative again and again with a tremendous emotional intensity. You'll carve out a pathway will even more repetition and emotion will become on the highway to the new way of achieving the result that will become a part of the habitual routine. Because before, remember that your brain cannot tell the difference between something that is your vividly image with something that you're actually experiencing. Condition sure that you automatically travel along with a new route that you spot one of the alpha ramps you take all the time. Now you just speed past them, and the fact that they actually become difficult to take. Powerful conditioning can be overestimated. I had recently read what the Boston Celtics, the great Larry Bird, was doing on a soft drink commercial in which he supposed to miss a jump shot. He made 9 baskets in a row before he could get himself to miss. That strongly has he conditioned himself over the years. When the ball hits his hand, he automatically goes through the pattern that is aimed to the putting of the ball through the hoop. I'm sure that he examined the portion of the Larry Care Bear's brain. This is the link to the motion. You will discover the substantial neural pathway. Realize that you cannot condition any of the behavior within ourselves. If we do it enough repetition, emotionally intensive, with the next step of the schedule to reinforce your new behavior, you can reward yourself for the succeeding. Do not wait until you don't wait until you've gone a year without smoking. When you've gone a day, give yourself a reward. Don't wait until lost 8 pounds. Don't even wait until you lost a pound. Then the minute you can push the plate away, the food still on, give yourself a pat on the back. Set up a series of short-term goals, milestones. As you reach each one, immediately reward yourself. If you've been depressed and worried, now each time that you can take action instead of worrying on it, each time you're smiling, somebody asks you, how are you doing? You say, great. Give yourself the reward for already being able to make the change with the necessary to ensure the long-term success. In this way, the nervous system learns to link greater pleasure to change. People who want to lose weight do not always see immediate results. Usually, losing a couple of pounds does not miraculously transform you into Ella Macpherson or Mel Gibson. So it's important to reward yourself as soon as you take specific action, making a positive emotional progress, like choosing to run around the block instead of running to the nearest McDonald's. If you don't, you find yourself saying, okay, I've lost a pound so far, I'm still fat, this will take forever, how long I'm going to, then might even short assessments, excuse and binge, understand the power of reinforcement. Will speak of the prospect condition of the new parent that recently have the pleasure of reading the excellent book that I highly recommend for those who want to make the thorough study of the condition of the enlightenment of the Don't Shoot with the Dog by Karen Pryor. This book sets forth the simple distinction about modifying animal behavior that parallel to my own distinctions gained in the years of the shaping of human behavior. With fascination in how some similar animals are human in terms of their force for the driving our actions, knowing the fundamental and conditioning enables us to take control of the force for the create with the destiny of our choice. We can live like animals manipulated by a circumstance of those around us, or we can learn from these laws, use them to maximize the fullest potential. Pryor discusses in her book that she learned to utilize pain to train the animals for years, whips and chairs for lions and bridle for horses and leashes for dogs. But she ran into a difficulty when she began to work with dolphins because when she tried to give them pain, they just swam away. This caused her to develop a more thoroughly understanding of the dynamics of power of the reinforcement training. There's nothing training cannot do. Nothing is above its reach. If you can turn bad morals to good, it can destroy bad principles and recreate good ones. It can lift men to angelship. Mark Twain. First organizing principle in any type of successful condition, power reinforcement. I must know to get ourselves to consistently produce a behavior and an emotion we create with a condition pattern. All patterns are resolved with a reinforcement, specifically the key of the creating consistency in your emotions and behaviors and conditioning. Law of reinforcement. Any patterns of the emotion behavior that continually reinforce will become the automatic with the condition response. Anything we fail to reinforce will eventually dissipate with the reinforce our own behavior to someone else with the power of the reinforcement. That every time we produce the behavior we get the reward. That's reward. We can praise the death and the gift of new freedom, etc. Or we can use the negative reinforcement that might frown over the loud noise of the even physical punishment, but it's crucial with the understanding of the reinforcement and not same with the punishment with the reward. Reinforcement respond with the behavior immediately after the occur, when the punishment and the reward may occur long afterward. Appropriate timing of the absolutely critical and effective conditioning, and coaches yield greater when the basket team achieve the perfect pick and roll. It has a lot of more impact if they're waited until they are debrief later in the locker room. Why? Because we all want to link sensation to the reinforcement pattern that is occurring. One of the problems with the judicial system is that when people commit criminal acts, they are sometimes not punished until years later. Intellectually, they may know the reason for their punishment, but the pattern of the behavior that generated this problem in the first place, but it's still intact. It must be interrupted, but neither does it take any pain linked to it. This is the only one way to truly change the behavior, the emotional long-term, that must train our brain to do things with effectively, not intellectually, neurologically, to change the course of the most of us do not realize we are all conditioning each other, shaping each other's behaviors consistently, with we're conditioning people negatively instead of the positively. So, an example of the curve with my daughter Jolie's ex-boyfriend. Jolie was very busy with school and dance and play she was in. She wanted her to call him wanted her to call him every single day. When she missed a few days, they called him, and he gave them a tremendous amount of pain. He wanted her to call more frequently, yet his strategy with her reinforcement was to badger and berate her when she did call. Have you ever been guilty of this? If you wanted your boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, significant other to call you more often, how effective do you think that would be to nag them to call? When you finally do though, you greet them with the statements like, "Oh, so you finally picked up the phone." While wonders in every case, I will always have the one that makes the. Why do I always have to be the one that makes the call? Why are you doing this? Is training him or her not to call you with a giving you your pain right after you have the very thing you want. What will happen as a result of the pain will be linked to the calling you, and he or she will avoid it even more in future. Julie's case, the pattern was continuous, going on for months until Julie felt that she couldn't win, and she didn't call, and she'd get pain if she did call, and she'd get pain if she did call. As you might have guessed, this pattern negatively reinforcement permeated many aspects of the relationship. Eventually, the relationship ended. If you truly want someone to call you, then when they do call, you need to respond to them with a delight. If you tell them how much you miss them, how much you love them, how grateful you are to talk with them, you think that they will be more inclined to call you again. Remember that linked pleasure for the behavior that want to someone to repeat. Among consulting companies across the United States, I've noted that most of the companies try to motivate the employees with using negative reinforcement as a primary strategy, trying to use the fear of punishment as a prime motivator. This will work in the short term, but not in the long term. Sooner or later, the company runs into the same problems that Eastern Europe has. People live in fear only for so long before they revolt. Second major study strategies, companies of the financial incentive of the wealth. The excellent idea is that usually appreciate the limited of its effectiveness at the point of a diminishing return, at which an additional incentive that don't really induce the greater quality of the work from people. In fact, most companies find that they're limited of what they can do in this area. If only can constantly reinforce the money, people begin to expect what they want when they do something of great value, they must have an immediate economic return. They begin to work statistically. Financial reward won't do anything unless they surpass stripping the capacity of the business to keep up with the economic demands of its employees. Third and most powerful way to motivate people to act is the personal development. By helping your employees to grow and expand personally from the beginning to feel passionate about life, personal people and their job that makes them want to be contributed more, but they do the sense of the personal pride rather than pressure on from others outside. But it does not mean you shouldn't have that incentive program. You should just make sure that you have the most powerful incentives of all, which is help people to expand and grow. Good and evil, the reward and punishment, are only motive of the rational creature. They are spur and the reins whereby all mankind are set on works and guides. John Locke. Or schedule your reinforcement so change lasts. When you're beginning to stop the new behavior, the new emotional pattern, the very important reinforcement yourself with anyone else with trying to establish with new patterns for the beginning of every time with the pattern of the desired behavior. For example, the pushing a plate away with the food with the still on it. You need to give yourself acknowledgement, pleasure, and reinforcement of the type of the truly appreciate and enjoy. Without the reinforcement of the behavior every time that they're eventually the rewards no longer can be effective and appreciated. One at a time was a uniquely enjoyable surprise will become an unexpected norm. Because of my commitment to help with those with the need, whenever I go through the airport, I invariably give to those with the request money. I never forget one particular gentleman who staked his claim in a particular spot in front of the terminal, and I frequented. Every time I came and I gave him some money. On the one morning, I was very rushed and I had no money in my pocket. And as I walked quickly, and he smiled and he said, "Hello, I'm sorry, but I don't have any money today." And he became angry because I was no longer giving him something he once thrilled to receive this from me. You and I to remember the element pleasant of surprise, one of the most enjoyable experiences a human can begin to have. It's most important and the most utilized. Your very reason why, if your behavior to last long term, it's invaluable that you understand and utilize what's known as variable schedule of the reinforcement. Let me give you a simple example of the dolphin training. The beginning of the training with the dolphin to jump with the trainer waits for the dolphin to jump and so on. The catch the animal doing something right and then reward it with a fish. By doing this, each time the dolphin jumps in the zone with the dolphin eventually makes the narrow association that if he jumps, he will get a fish. Pairing the pleasure of the behavior the trainer desire also love of the trainer to condition the dolphin to jump it again and again. Eventually, the trainer will give the fish only when the dolphin jumps higher. By slowly raising the standard, the trainer can shape the dolphin's behavior. Here is the key. If the dolphin always is rewarded, he might become habituated, no longer give it 100%. So in the future of the dolphin, is rewarded sometimes after the first jump, perhaps after a fifth or after the second. The dolphin is never sure whether the jump will be rewarded. Sense of the anticipation of the reward might be given, and coupled with the uncertainty is to which will be rewarded. Couple the dolphin and consistently give it the full effort. The reward is never to be taken for granted. This is identical force for the drive of the people to gamble. The ones they have the gamble, they've been rewarded. Length and intense for the pleasure of the reward. Excitement and anticipation pushes them to go forward. When they have been rewarded in a while, often they have been even stronger sense of this time of the world that they will be rewarded. When the drive of the gambler with the possible of the winning again, if the person were with the gamble without every receiving the reward, they would give up and have the receiving a few small Ward's winning just a few hands, earning back just some of their money, and keeps them in a state of the anticipation that could hit the jackpot. This is why people who discontinue the bad habit, like smoking or gambling, for periods of months, and then they decide to have just one more hit, or actually reinforce the very pattern by trying to making it more difficult to free the habit of the life for a lifetime. If you smoke one more cigarette when you're stimulating your nervous system to expect that in the future that you reward yourself this way again, you keep the neuroassociation highly effective in fact with strengthening the very habit you're trying to break. If you want to reinforce personal behavior long term, you may want to utilize what's known as the fixed scheduled reinforcement. In her book, Karen Pryor described the training of the dolphin to make the 10 jump in order to make sure the dolphin consistently jumps 10 times. You want to reward them only on the 10th jump each and every time. You cannot depend to many behaviors before the reinforcement occurs. But the dolphin is rewarded only on the 10th jump. The dolphin soon learns that it does not need to make a greater effort on the previous 9 jumps, and quality declines. In the same reaction we might see with the people that receive the paycheck every 2 weeks. Employees now know that there were certain things expected of them for which they receive the regular compensation. The challenge is that many of the people learn to do only the minimum necessary to receive the reward because there is no surprise in the workplace. Pay expected, of course, but if they are only rewarded, then the workers will do only what they expect the minimum they can do for the pay. If there are occasional surprises like recognition, bonus, promotions, other perks, they will put more forth extra effort, hopes, and anticipation when they will be rewarded and acknowledged. Remember, they are surprised, but it must not be predictable, and they become ineffective at taking for granted. This expectation you will drive the behavior. Vary your rewards. See greater results. It may change yourself with anyone's you're managing. The third tool of the reinforcement that can also be used is known as the jackpot. The jackpot can help with the compound with the reinforcement if, for example, the ones in a rare, while you give the dolphin not only one fish but 3 or 4 for its behavior, it makes the dolphin anticipate even more that if they just put the one extra effort, it might be they get a huge reward that's compelled the dolphin to constantly give them more to itself. Human beings respond similarly often to company when making people to give the reward that's much greater than anticipated. It create great motivation to continue to give great service in the future with anticipation so that they may receive an even greater reward. Same principle can work like a magic with your children. Create a jumpstart. A jackpot principle can be also used with someone who is not motivated to produce any result whatsoever. Again, if the dolphin is trained to have an animal which the team is unable to motivate at all, they will sometimes give it a dozen fish, even though it doesn't have nothing to earn it. The pleasure of the craver is sometimes enough to break the dolphin's old pattern, put it into a state of such pleasure that it becomes willing to be trained. Again, beings are similar. If someone who seems to not have done anything right, and suddenly give them a reward just out of compassion and caring, they can stimulate that they're taking at a new level the typical types of behavior and performance. Most important thing to remember about conditioning, however, they reinforce the desired behavior immediately in the mind. The minute you find yourself responding playfully to what you used to frustrate you, reinforce yourself. Do it again and creating even more pleasure laugh. Remember, each of the time you create a strong emotional feeling, either positive or negative, you create a connection in your nervous system. If you repeat the pattern again and again, visualize the same imagery that makes you feel strong, that makes you laugh, you find it easier and stronger to be laughing in the future, the pattern will be established. The minute anyone you or reinforcement does something right, you create immediate reward. Reinforce it inconsistently with the kind of reward you and the individual personally wants or desire the most. Give yourself the emotional reward of the turning of the favorite music, smiling, seeing yourself, accomplishing the goal, conditioning of the critical. This is how we produce the consistent results. And once again, to remember the pattern of the emotional behavior, the reinforce and reward, but the consistent base of the becoming the condition automatic. Any pattern that we fail to reinforce will eventually dissipate. But now that we've accomplished the first 5 steps, let's go to the final step. National Neuro Association Conditioning Master 6, Step 6, test it. Let's review what you've accomplished. You've decided upon the new pattern of the motion of the behavior that you desire, the given leverage over yourself of the change. You've interpreted the old pattern, you've made the new alternative, you've conditioned it, and so the consistent. The only step left is to test it to make sure that it's going to work in the future. One of the ways doing this is taught in the neuro-logistic programming or in future pacing. This means that you're imagining the situation that you've been frustrated with. Example, the notice in fact that it still makes you frustrated. If you have the new pattern feeling fascinated, has replaced it. If normally you still have the urge to smoke every time you feel overwhelmed, imagine yourself in the overwhelming situation. Know that instead of you have the urge to read and run with whenever the new alternative, your condition, the management, the same stimuli that have you with the trigger of the old emotion, with the behavior, that nothing to help feel the certain that your new empowering alternative is automatic. You would know that the new pattern will work for you in the future. In addition, you must have the ecological change that you just made, with the word ecologically implied with the consequences will and impact with the changes you made yourself on these of the realm that will support the business of the personal relationship to make the determination that this new pattern of the property based on the current lifestyle and the belief and the values. The next page, simple checklist that you have to help yourself and be certain that your new success pattern will last and it is appropriate. If you're attempting to create a new pattern that didn't last, you need to recycle it back to step 1. Are you really clear about what you want and why you want it? Step 2. Most people who've tried to unsuccessfully make a change that usually don't have enough leverage. You need to make a public commitment in order to get more leverage on yourself to make these people that will not let you off the hook. And if you feel that there's enough leverage, and check step 3. If you know what you want and you've got with enough leverage, it's possible that you will applying beat itself repeatedly against the window of the pain. You've done the same things over and over again with the more and more intense, but you haven't changed your approach the most and interrupt your pattern. You feel that all these steps are in place and go to step 4. If your efforts have been not producing the change, but ideally demonstrate that you've left out the step. Find a new empowering alternative to get yourself out of the pain into the pleasure of the powerful, convenient, as your old approach was. Also meaning that it is now has the opportunity to explore being lifted and more creative. Find a role model, somebody else who is being able to eliminate the habit of negative set of emotions that you want to change. The ecology check. Make certain that pain is fully associated with the old pattern. When you think of the old behavior, the feelings of it, did you picture the feelings, feeling things of the painful, but not instead of the pleasurable? Make certain pleasure the fully associated with the new pattern. When you think of the new behavior, the feeling of it, did you picture the feeling with the pleasure of the not instead of the painful? Align your value with the belief of the rules. New behavior, the feeling consistent with the value of the belief of the rules of your life. We'll discuss that later in chapters. Make sure the belief of the old pattern habit to maintain with the new behavior, the feeling that will still allow you to get benefits from feeling of the pleasure that you also even get from the old pattern. Future pace. Imagine yourself behaving the new way of the future. Imagining the thing that would have triggered you to adopt the old pattern, feeling with it certain that you can use the new pattern instead of the old one. If you started to make a change with the button now, then not follow through, you obviously haven't reinforced your pattern with enough pleasure. The step 5 condition, utilize both variable and fixed schedules of the reinforcement. Make sure that your new and empowering patterns last. The 6th step of the neuro association condition can be used at anything in the channel of the relationship, the problems with the business, being stuck with the pattern of yelling at your own kids. Let's say you worry too much about the things that you want you to have no control. How can you, the 6th step of the chain with a disempowering pattern? Ask yourself, what do I want instead of the worry? Get leverage over yourself to realize what what your worry does is destroy the life, bringing it to the threshold of what you costly ultimately life will not willing to pay the price anymore. Imagine the joy of getting this monkey off of your back and being truly free of the once for all. Interpret the pattern every time the worry break the pattern of being totally outrageous to take with your finger up with your nose, with a belt out. What a beautiful morning at the top of your lungs. Creating an empowering alternative which will do instead of the worry, but pull out the journal and write down the plan, which can immediately, instead of the maybe you can go for a run. While you're running, you can think of the new solution, condition with the new pattern, vividly imagine rear of the new pattern with a tremendous emotional intensity repetition until the new thought of the behavior of the emotional pattern is automatic. Reinforce yourself with taking the first step of the head, seeing yourself succeed again and again, seeing the result of the bands for the giving you for the pleasure for the desire to give you the repetition, emotional intensity of the condition of the new pattern until it is consistent. Test it, see if it works. Thinking about the situation that you've to worry, and see that you no longer worry the situation. You can even see the same 6-step master step of the national or social condition to negotiate a contract. The first step of the laying the groundwork, getting clear about what you want, and have it prevented you from getting the work to do the other person wants. What is both for you? What will have a successful contract? Get leverage getting the person to link the pain, not to making the deal with the pleasure to making it, but to interpret the pattern, any belief of the idea of the keeping of the deal, of the moving ahead, of the creating alternative, the need that you've thought of the before that will meet both your needs. Reinforce the alternative, consequently reinforcing the pleasure and the positive impact of this alternative. See if it is going out of the work out everybody win-win situation, if so, negotiate with a successful conclusion. Same principles for you to get the kids to clean their rooms, improve the quality of your marriage, boost your the company's level of quality, get your enjoyment out with your job, make you the country a better place to live. By the way, sometimes our kids use the same 6 steps use an abbreviated form. Remember when I said if you get enough leverage interpreted as someone's pattern strongly enough, then you'll find with a new pattern condition. A friend of mine tried almost everything he knew to stop smoking. Finally, his program was broken. How? It was a 6-year-old daughter walked in one day while he was lighting up, and she knew that she wanted what she wanted, and she had massive leverage, and she interrupted his old pattern by crying, "Daddy, please stop smoking and killing yourself." He said, "Honey, what are you talking about? What's wrong?" She repeated herself and said, "Honey, I'm not killing. He said, "Honey, I'm not killing myself." He nodded her head, pointed a cigarette, sobbed, and Daddy said, "Please stop killing yourself. I want you to be there when I get married." This was a man who tried to quit a dozen times with nothing had worked. Until then, the cigarettes were out of the door, and the head he smoked since. He has heartstrings firmly grasped in the tiny head, and he instantly got what she wanted. Since then, he had found in any alternative to smoking to give up the same with the pleasure sensation. If all you do with the first 3 steps of the neuroassociated condition, then that may be enough to create tremendous change. Once you've decided what you want, gain leverage and interpreted the per pattern, life often provides you with a new way of looking at things. If leverage is strong enough to compel to find with a new pattern of the condition that you pretty much count on the words to give to you the test. Now you have the neuroassociation condition. Over the chains, the key is to you won't unless you know what you're using it for, and you go to know what you truly desire. You must find. Chapter 7: How to get what you really want.